Orange alert, orange alert. Yeah, don't encourage me. Don't encourage me. This is the Spacebook, a hub and home for all out there entertainment. At the start of another week, another block, and whilst here in the 21st century, we're positively spoilt for choice, aren't we? Platforms, devices, all that media, and decades of the best and the rest of pop culture at the tap of a screen or a hoofa-doofa, or on physical media if you've got a library, just like I have. Probably something that we're all too short of, though, is time, particularly when it comes to that list of much-watched shows that never gets any shorter, does it? And there's often so much that we'd like to revisit or just simply catch up on that we missed first or even the second time around with all that. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, and this is Listed, the live podcast where we positively revel in a show from the past and maybe quantum leap back to right a wrong about something that we may have missed from TV history. Any one of us, we show the others what we've been missing out on the whole time. We're going to find out which one this show falls into as we get into the conversation. Listed is recorded in front of a live audience. We'll be watching you, watching us, and taking in your memories from the live comment section, shaking off the dust there from the old grey hard drive as we get stuck in to another show, shaking down another all-time telly great here on the Spacebooks Telly Club. And yeah, this time we're talking about a seminal piece of cult TV here this time with my fellow channel hoppers. It's on the sofa again with Ian David Diaz here.
Hello. I am number 6.
Are you really?
Yeah. Not number 9, thank God. But yeah, number 6, definitely. Yeah.
That's
I'm looking forward to this.
Size, is that shoe size or IQ? Which one's
IQ, I think.
Tish. Yes, the numbers gags are going to come thick and fast with this one. Ian, there are not many shows, I think, that you can look at and say that show is not like anything else at all. And when people ask you about it, they say, "Well, what's it about?" And you struggle to say. You say, it's about this guy. It's about this place. It's kind of about this. You don't really know where to start with The Prisoner. I think we're going to attempt to get stuck into all of that. There's not a great deal of it. And yet there's so much to say about it. We're going to see what we can do over the next 90 minutes. Are you feeling confident?
Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, I was never a fan of The Prisoner. I watched a couple of episodes, not when it was originally released, obviously, because I was too young, but I have seen a couple of episodes and I did find it interesting, but it didn't really, I didn't really want to see the rest of them. But
it's just bubbled away on the surface.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know of it, obviously, because it's a cult classic TV show, but it's one I should actually revisit and watch. How many seasons did it go with? I can't remember.
Well, we're going to come to all of this. Da, da, da.
Love that car. We're going
to get into as much of the iconography, no doubt some of the quotes, and some of these confounding storylines too. Fortunately, we have brighter minds than ours to help guide the way, including one which belongs to our favourite atomic blonde. She's back too. Welcome back, Andy.
Hello. Yeah, full of cold snuffling, but hey, I wasn't going to miss the Prisoner, so I'm here. Just thought we'd start with sniffing. Sorry.
That's very, very confident. I mean, this is one of those shows, Andy, that even though there's relatively little of it, the amount that's been written about this, people have created sort of university syllabuses sort of geared around this, delivered lectures about it, and written dissertations about it. As much as I love 1,000,001 of the shows, that's never really happened with Galloping Galaxies, for example.
No, I mean, I think it's so open to interpretation about what the show is actually about. And spoilers for everybody, you don't find out at the end either. So,
do you?
But it's really left up to the audience to decide, isn't it? And I think that's, like you say, that's why we still talk about it now. And you could ask 100 people and probably get 100 different answers what the show is about. Why did he resign? what was the village, all of that. And you could just talk for hours and hours. And that's why, people still watch it now. And it was so ahead of its time. That's why it's not really dated. It was the original mystery box show, so, but,
I like that.
That's a
good strapline.
She's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah. As I said, so much has been written and said about this show. How can we possibly try and cover it all here in the next, say, 90 minutes here on the Spacebook Listed? We're not. This isn't intended as some sort of ultimate take on this show. It's just the latest take, our take, and the little things that have amused us and crossed our minds, crossed our field of vision on this latest rewatch. I'm happy to say we're also joined by another guest making a grand entrance. It's one of YouTube's latest and possibly greatest of enigmas. I only know them as Little Platoon, and I don't know how well you know them, if you know their material or not. We're going to find out what makes them tick and what they think of this TV classic too. Welcome to the channel, Little Platoon.
Good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
I love it.
No,
I love it.
Not the Bond villain voice,
Fantastic.
but you're close.
Fantastic. Never seen this, Ben. It's fun.
He's moving.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, I've got a little moving guy now, and so I thought I would give him a go.
Awesome.
He does stuff like cheers. I can cheers you. There you go. I thought I'd have a
Brilliant.
crack. Can do the
Absolutely
sardonic eyebrow of I've just heard something I don't agree with. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It'll probably go badly wrong and explode at some point, but otherwise it'll be good fun. But thank you for having me on.
I'm just wondering where you get your highlights done there, mate. But yeah, I'm just happy to have you here. And yeah, this is going to be a good one. As soon as we said we were going to be talking about this, I had lots of DMs and stuff. You're doing The Prisoner? You're talking about The Prisoner? Oh, I can't wait to hear this. Oh, I'd like to be involved with this or whatever else. Of course, you can be involved. As always, we're live streaming this over to the Spacebooks Facebook group and to YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, in front of a live chat full of friends and fans just like you. And at various points in the show, we'll be checking in with whatever memories that we've managed to rattle dust free from your big grey hard drive and your favourite moments and quotes maybe from this great show from times past. I'm delighted to say that, it's filling up nicely. So it's good to have you here, some familiar names and familiar faces. And yeah, we'll be connecting with you guys a little later on. Don't you worry about that. Where should we start? I think we should probably start here. Okay, yeah. The Prisoner is a 1967 espionage sci-fi thriller series made in Great Britain, running for 17 episodes. It was the newest revolutionary vehicle for the legendary TV star Patrick McGoohan, who conceived the format, played the lead character, and would write and even direct some of these installments over an intense production period, effectively split into 2 seasons, although generally it tends to get shown as one because there's only 17 of them. Nothing about this series is like any other. I don't think that's any particular revelation. But McGoohan was 39 years old when this went into production. He'd been a huge TV star all the way through the 60s, previous 8 years as the star of an action show, a big action show that was successful on both sides of the Atlantic. But he was actually an Irish-American-born actor. He was born in the United States to Irish immigrant parents, but he'd been raised in Britain. And he seems like the ultimate Englishman, really. But he was the only person who's in every single episode of The Prisoner. Well, the only full person. There's a sort of half person involved as well. Everything else changed. But McGoohan himself is a beguiling presence too, isn't he? When the show starts when the credits start to roll, the extended credits, whichever version that you're watching, this figure sort of dressed in black, going to resign, something we've all been tempted to do at one. It's a compelling image, isn't it, that anybody can relate to?
It's what's clever about this show is it shows you rather than it shows you in images rather than say in dialogue. Like the beginning credit sequence, you don't even have to know the ins and outs. You know that he's angry, you know that he's resigned, and you know that he's driven away and stuff like that. And then they have the smoke coming through the door, and then they knock him out. Yeah. And all that, it explains everything in a short space of time, which I think is quite clever. Could only come from his brain, because he's also a brilliant director as well. He directed lots of Columbo episodes. He directed a lot of American TV and stuff. So, and he's a very good writer as far as I know. So yeah, very good actor too.
Well, I often say, Ian, and we spoke about this a couple of days ago, didn't we? He was probably the angriest man on television.
Well,
and
yeah.
nobody loses their shit like Patrick McGoohan.
Yeah,
and we see that right away. It's such a idiosyncratic performance, and he's got so much star quality, hasn't he, Andy? You know, he'd been massively popular as John Drake in Danger Man from the ITC stable of shows from 1960 to 1968. So much so that the Broccolis, they did want him for Bond.
Yeah.
But this at this moment in time, he had so much to lose making this show.
Yes, and I mean, I guess it was so different from Danger Man, and this is often called like the unofficial sequel, isn't it? It's actually like Danger Man retiring. It was never formally said, but that was always kind of the
thematic sequel.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, he's just got such a breadth of range and talent. I mean, I always sort of see him very much he's the same era and fold as like, you know, Richard Burton and Anthony Hopkins. And I think he's equally on par with those guys, but for whatever reason, he didn't quite get the same trajectory, maybe because he stayed more in TV than film. So I think he's often quite underrated. And it's not till people see him in this, you know, where he's playing different versions of himself. And some episodes he's playing insane, other episodes, you know, but it's completely believable. Whatever he's going through, you believe he's going through it. And that's what really takes the audience. You're going through the journey with him.
Never thought of it like that, yeah.
And every week you kind of think, oh, we know what's going on because he knows what's going on. And next week it all gets flipped on its head again. So you're kind of, I always feel I'm going through the range of emotions with him. And that's what I say, you just can't, you're always just like, every time you think, or he thinks he knows, it's then, you know, someone bursts the bubble and literally with the Rovers as well. But, you know, and we're back to square one again. And I think this show wouldn't have worked without an actor of his caliber at all.
I couldn't agree more. Earlier, I mean, Ian just mentioned about him being relatable too, and this was McGoohan's production, a co-production between ITC, which he'd worked for, Lou Grade's company, and his own newly formed Everyman Productions. And I think that he named it Everyman because he saw this figure, Ian, just as we said, you know, is the guy that everybody can relate to, and as if he's channeling something else. I first saw this show when I was quite young. You know, Ian, you've said it sort of bubbled away for you, and you've clearly seen it. Have you ever seen it all the way through, or have you just caught bits of it here and there?
Sorry. Which one are you talking to?
Which one are you talking to?
Andy.
I mean, I remember when it was kind of repeated. I think it was on BBC Two, like tea
Repeats a
time.
lot.
No, ITV.
I can't remember, but I was young.
BBC Two had it in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, BBC Two. Yeah, and I think when I watched it then, I didn't have a Scooby what was going on at all. It just looked great and it was fun to watch, but I really didn't understand, you know, what was going on, the politics of it. And then sort of revisiting it when I was older and an adult, I kind of went a bit more, okay, I get the allegories now. I kind of understand, but I still, you know, and I've got my own thoughts as to what it all meant. But yeah, I mean, I've watched it a few times. I mean, I haven't watched it for quite a while since you said, so it was actually quite good catching up. I'm probably up to about episode 6 or 7 now because I just carried on going. So
oh, good, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is that kind of show. I think it's so compelling. You know, when you're looking at the episode guide list, you're not seeing a never-ending list of episodes like you're trying to watch CSI Miami or whatever it is. I don't think, even though I describe you as an enigma there, Little Platoon, we know very little about you. Even your true identity is not out there. I think we can tell by the tone of your voice, you may be the youngest person on the panel. So how well do you know The Prisoner? You obviously didn't grow up watching this show, but was it always on your radar, in your wheelhouse? Have you seen it all? And when did you first come across it?
I'd always been sort of aware of it, and I think I'd always seen clips certainly for a good few years. I'm Not a Number always sort of pops up in various different contexts. Yeah. I'd never actually watched the show itself until purely by accident. I think it was last year, and a friend of mine was writing something, which was set in a sort of mysterious village that was back in time and cut off from the real world in the modern day, and he kept getting stuck. And I'd heard of The Prisoner, and I knew the vague premise of it, so I thought, well, I'm going to give my friend a hand with like plot ideas. I'll go and take a look at the show and see if there's anything in it. So purely by accident, I think toward the end of last year, I sat down and watched. I don't actually remember how far in I got. Probably the first, I would guess, 6 or 7 episodes. I've not finished the whole thing yet. But it's a peculiar one. There are so many shows that you can go back to, and they are so very obviously dated. But the aesthetic for this is so unique to it that, okay, yeah, there are certain fashion choices you can say, well, I know this has come from the before times, the olden days. But there's so much else about it, though, which doesn't just neatly fall into like the 60s, 70s category. So it doesn't look dated in the way that many of its contemporary shows do. Yeah. And it's weird, and it is quite beguiling. It's a strange thing. I don't even know if I enjoy it necessarily, but it is one that I sit there and I watch, and I will keep watching it because I do want to know what the hell is going on. And what the hell the white balloon thing is, and why that's a villain.
Do you think that's due to what Ian was saying, sort of having this guy steering the ship, who could literally do it all and had such an obvious, clear vision in his head of where to take it and its greater significance? I mean, he couldn't possibly have known we'd still be talking about it nearly 60 years later, but wanting to say something more rather than just to keep people's eyes on the screen to sell breakfast cereal for another 50 minutes. There was a bigger mission statement there.
Oh, to be sure, and he is an incredibly powerful, quite maybe erratic is the wrong word for it, but he's such an intense actor and in so many different modes that you can't really not watch him. There are many leading actors who sort of fade into the background and then they're not notable anymore. But The Prisoner only really works because he's so powerful in whatever it is he's doing. It's not always an easy watch because of that. I think sometimes you could say he's over-egging some parts of the performance, but that is a very convincing way of keeping people. It dates it a little. It's slightly overly dramatic, but you can't not watch him. So there is that to be said for it, and there's a lot to be said for that. And then, as you say, whether or not the rest of it you could have built this show without someone so powerfully at the center of it, I don't think you could, because it is quite esoteric, and you do have quite a revolving cast of people, and it is so fundamentally strange and hard to really get a grasp on that if you were given any less convincing an actor as your lead, and then you had this rotating cast of number twos, and then you had the strangeness of the balloon and the village itself, and all of this slightly Wicker Man style weirdness to it, you probably wouldn't have anything to latch onto. So yeah, he's essential for this. I think he's what makes it something that you just can't take your eyes off of.
I heard that, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that there was hardly a script for what they shot. Because if you watch the pilot, they're wandering around a lot. So they literally had to... So I heard that the script it was just barely written. Patrick McGowan knew what he wanted, but the script wasn't there. So if you watch the pilot very carefully, there's a lot of time where they waste, where he's walking around. And the dead giveaway is, I don't know if you noticed, guys, when I'm assuming you've all watched the pilot, right? There's a scene in it where he's talking to the woman, right? The woman about, you can get the helicopter or whatever. And it's obvious they shot her on location, but then when they had the reverse of Patrick McGowan, he's obviously in the studio. There's a blue behind him, and so it was like, I don't know. I think
this show, Ian. There are people out there and if you are watching, any of you, I know who you are. We'll be seeing you. But there are people out there who get very, very shirty about this show because every aspect of its production is so meticulously detailed. I think probably even more so than that of Doctor Who and Star Trek. And maybe it's because there's so little of it, but every single nut and bolt of the show is known. And the first few episodes, you're quite right. I mean, what you're picking up on, it isn't. I don't believe it's what you think you're picking up on. But you are picking up on a tumultuous production process, a lot of backwards and forwards. Certainly, the first 2 episodes, they weren't reshot, but there are at least 2, possibly 3 versions of both of the first episodes, and lots of material was, I think, juggled around and spliced together because it was a furious production process. And once he got the okay, McGowan sold the concept to Grade largely based on the fact they'd had this long working relationship. They'd got a fiery working relationship, but they respected one another, which is a story you hear a lot with Lou Grade. But he was prepared to bankroll this. But McGowan kept coming back to him with sort of problem after problem, where every time they would speak, it would be like, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Well, how much is that going to cost me? And so some of it was it all being tightened up afterwards. I mean, a lot of the interiors, most of the interiors were filmed at MGM in Borehamwood. Yeah. So a lot of it was obviously the interiors, all of the sets, the Green Dome, the houses, all that kind of thing. That was all filmed there. The rest of it was filmed on location. No doubt we'll get into that. But yes, so you are right. As they were going along, particularly these first two, finding a balance was a real learning curve, I think. And McGowan was meticulous about every aspect of it. He was all over the show. I mean, it is a populist show, and this got the TV Times cover there. You know, it got the full treatment. Like you would roll out any expensive news show starring a lead that people liked. He was a bankable lead. But when you dig into the pages of this, there's an article there with Patrick McGowan. And just looking at this Little Platoon, looking at this piece here, people have debated for decades, what is this show about? And about, what, did McGowan lose his mind making The Prisoner? And is this true? Is that true? But even here in the original article, you see here that the TV Times said there's never been a better kept secret than this one. The studio soundstage has been banned to visitors since the day filming began. McGowan believes he is breaking into completely new television territory in presentation and stories alike. The idea is his own. He is also the executive producer. He has taken over direction of many of the sequences, but without giving himself an on-screen credit. He has buried himself in the cutting rooms during the editing of the episodes, and he has worked on every single script, irrespective of who may have written it. So he says, if people don't like it, there's only one person to blame, me. So that's him. There's being proprietorial, and there's that, isn't there? It's like XL.
But he was like that anyway. I mean, I remember very when I was in my teens. I remember before the advent of the internet and stuff. I remember my friend, who was a lot older than me, in fact, he was my dad's friend, going to a convention of The Prisoner and having the coat, the jacket. They had conventions. People that they had like halls where people would come and talk about The Prisoner and stuff like that. And they'd all come dressed up, either one person. So this guy was speaking to my dad, and I overheard, came in that penny farthing. A bike. Do you know what I mean? Wow. So it was a big thing. I think it was a big thing after the show had come off the air, I think.
Just like the original series of Star Trek, the myth started to grow.
Yeah.
Once it finished, it premiered in Britain and America. I don't think it premiered at exactly the same time, but it was within a very short period of time, and it took off internationally and captured people's imaginations. Platoon, when you look at the show now, you obviously, to say that it's dated, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Given the fact that it came out at a time when the James Bond movies were at the height of their initial wave of popularity, and the Avengers was on television, and all of that kind of thing to culture was going on. The Beatles were still together. I think Sgt. Pepper had come out. Sgt. Pepper came out in not the same year, 1967, didn't it? So it's right at the dead center of this cultural explosion, and The Prisoner is sort of tied into that somehow.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think you could probably tonally and thematically place it, as you say, somewhere between Bond and Avengers. I mean, it's you've got some of the Bond era action set pieces to it, but you do also have. It's not quite got Bond's style of humor. I think from what I've seen of the Avengers, it does probably veer more in that direction. It's a genre piece, and it's a piece very much of that time and that era. But what makes it, I think, beguiling in the way that neither Bond nor Avengers or anything else from that time really is precisely that there's so clearly quite a deep and powerful vision behind it. But nobody besides the actor and the creator seems to actually know what that was, or what it was really going for, or really trying to convey. And from what I understand, you don't ever get the mysteries fully answered by the end. I've not seen all of the show. unlike something like Lost, for example, which does much the same thing in building up mystery, and then an incredibly unsatisfying conclusion, which doesn't really answer any questions. With this one, there's enough in it which makes you think, well, actually, no, I think keeping these questions unanswered was the point, as opposed to just being badly written trash like Lost. This is actually kind of, it's engaging. It leaves you wanting to find out what the answers to all these questions happen to be, as opposed to taking the risk of trying to answer the questions and satisfying nobody. It might be that there never was any answer to these questions even when writing it, and they didn't really know where they were going with it, but in which case they've done a very successful job of not letting that show.
I think Patrick McGowan is kind of a genius, really, because if you look at everything that's in there, everything is so artistic, from the deliberate design of the jacket to the the design where they were trying to follow him and those guys were on the thing in the middle of the room. I don't know if you remember that in the pilot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very 60ish, but
simple ideas.
But it's a very simple idea, and I'm so in love with the 60s. Tone in those days. I love how he's angry when he comes to meet was it number one? Yet he doesn't punch him. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't punch him and hold him to hostage. He's very English. He's really angry. And well, we'll see. And he walks out. Do you know what I mean? Like if it was an American show, I think it's because
even though this has that transatlantic appeal, and there's a definite cosmopolitan feel to this, Andy, with the village itself is full of Poles and Czechs, Italians, people from not exactly all over the world, but certainly from Europe. It seems localized. So you've got that, and yet it's all very mannered, and it's very much part of a British way of life, isn't
British. It's very British.
Oh, massively, yeah. I mean, the thing is, because of obviously where it's filmed, it was deliberately built to look Mediterranean, so it could be anywhere. We could assume it's in the UK, but it could be anywhere, and just the fact that in itself, and then you have some episodes say they're in Latvia, and then maybe they're in Europe, and maybe they're, so even the aesthetic of the place, I think the fact that they were able to film there and not have to build the sets adds to the show. If it was a typical 60s like set and had to be filmed indoors, the show wouldn't have worked. So you've got this great aesthetic of where it's filmed and this sort of mystery that it looks like it's in the middle of nowhere, but and they really lean into that as well, which I think is great. But I think the thing with I think the reason this is having a bit of a resurgence as well, though, is because obviously we've all been through lockdown, and a show that was written and the politics written in the 60s, you can actually, to a degree, say it's disappointing that the politics are still relevant in lots of ways, because we really haven't moved forward that much. But people can still really relate to it now. We might see something different in it now than what people saw back then. But the whole thing about taking freedoms away and governments and Big Brother and being spied on, it's probably more prevalent now in our society, with all CCTV and the things they were hinting at in the village, that, you can't do anything without us knowing your every waking moment, I think is even more in people's consciences now. And maybe people are getting more out of it now than they did back then because of that. And that's why I think
it's also
because the simple thing that they're asking is, why did he resign? That's the hook, isn't it, Ian? They want to know. Only he knows. We don't know why he resigns. They don't know. They certainly want that information, and is he going to give it to them? And that's what keeps us watching.
It's basically a psychedelic dream. That's what it is.
It's big acid trip,
It's one big, because look at all the colours and everything, you know what I mean? And also it has that vibe of the 60s as well. Because remember in the 60s, Britain ruled, man. We had Bond, we had the Beatles, we had the Avengers. We were a top. Yeah, we had the fashion, Carnaby Street. You know what I mean? And Prisoner's part of that kind of area. Do you know what I mean? And when I look at it, when I was watching it recently, I was like, this is a psychedelic thing. It really is. The colours, the way the people are moving and stuff. It's just it's a very unique show. And I kind of liked I obviously I need to watch some more. But I liked the pilot because it was so weird. And it was obvious, as I said, they were just trying to me, it felt like they were trying to fill time. Because when he was walking around, he was just walking, all these shots where he's walking around.
It was very, very deliberate.
Trying to get the most of the location.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
I think that was part of it. I think that was part of it. I also think McGowan, we've just had that quote there. That was day one in the TV Times, their Little Platoon. He knew that he was taking people, he was taking the audience somewhere that not only they'd never really been to before, like an 8 p.m. primetime audience on British TV in the mid-60s, that he knew he was doing that and breaking new ground. But he also, I think he suspected that there'd be a certain amount of resistance too, because the ideas are so, I wouldn't say they're subversive, but they're very conceptual. As you say, they're certainly esoteric. And there's a lot of allegory in here as well. And to the Man from U.N.C.L.E. generation, there's always the danger people are going to switch off for things they don't understand. We see that now, don't we, Platoon?
We do. And I think it was said earlier that you got sort of the original mystery box show. The mystery box is a trope, and it's used often for a reason. The mystery box it plays on our sort of fascination, our want to understand and our want to learn more. It's overused because it is such an effective device. It's not necessarily a problem to use it. This show uses it, I think, really well. I mean, you've got the mystery of his resignation. The location mystery, I think, is really well handled. If anything, the only thing that really gives it away as a very British show is the manners, as has been pointed out. But they actually set up the location mystery really well. So, you go into shops and you hear just a snippet of conversation in German, and then you go into another shop and you hear just a snippet of conversation in Italian. This idea that it is fundamentally rootless and out of place, and it could just as well be on a different planet as well as a different part of the globe. That kind of thing works really well. The maps that don't show you anything beyond the mountains, even, I want a bigger map. So he gives them just a slightly bigger version of the same map. It's got good humor in it as well. But the location mystery sort of automatically grips you. And because the village is designed to look like a little bit of everywhere, it is so strange and out of place, and you do find yourself wanting to understand. You're fully invested in the location mystery. Where exactly is this? The only thing I think, as I say, that does give it away is the fact that everybody does fall back on very sort of traditional 60s British manners. After you've got through the language barriers, or after you've got through the snippets of foreign conversation, they all do behave like very quite sort of upper middle class gentlemen. All the villains sound basically like me. It's nice. But the mystery stuff is good. And then of course you get his resignation. If anything, I sort of find that's less interesting to me than the world mystery. I think like his resignation stuff, which is sort of it is. I guess maybe we've seen a bit too much of it since the show came out. The
resignation drama question is the hook, isn't it, for mainstream audiences to cook them?
Yeah.
But now, in a conventional way,
we've seen so much of that sort of nameless government mystery thing since the 1960s. I think maybe like for someone like me who comes to watch it only last year, once you've gone through things like All the President's Men and everything that stems from the 70s and American conspiracy drama, that's almost less interesting because that's a little bit more conventional now. But at the time, obviously, that was probably way before its time. It's just that
I literally think that for the normies or for the people that don't dive into shows deeply, all they see is they want him to escape from the island. Mm-hmm. That's
an initial fight or flight kind of thing, isn't it?
And the rest is that's why this show is so loved, as far as I understand. And the rest is deep level. Like somebody told me there was one episode where he got voted to be the mayor or something like that.
Right.
To be the new number two, basically.
That had different layers of the way governments are ruling in the world and stuff like that. So it was very deep level, but the people that are watching that couldn't see that deep level. All they saw was him trying to escape from the island. That's all they saw. So it operated on various levels, but the normies only saw the top bit. Do you know what I mean? That's why it's so loved, because the more you delve into the show, the more you realize that it was saying loads of different things in loads of different episodes.
Well, somebody just mentioned the fact that everybody's always smiling all the time. That's another aspect of it, because they're sort of, I wouldn't say they're vacant smiles, but they're not smiles of happiness. They're smiles of conformity. And as if to say, if you were like us, Andy, you'd be smiling too. It's sinister.
It's absolutely a running theme, and hence why everybody's dressed the same. So it's like everybody's dressed the same. There's no personal identity. There's no personality, and all the way through, it's just, why can't you just settle down? Why can't you just take part? Why can't you just accept? Yeah, why can't you just accept you're going to spend the rest of your life here? Because they even right at the beginning, even if he tells them why he's resigned, they ain't gonna let him go. You know,
It's
so there's too much. Because obviously as a spy, he's got too much information that they're ever gonna, in case he falls into the wrong hands, or you know, so his only chance is to escape. It doesn't matter what he does, other than can he just get himself out, or can he take the place down with him when he goes? I think is kind of what you see.
The feel I get from it, Andy.
Yeah.
The feel I get from it, Andy, is that number 6 isn't necessarily surprised that a place like the village exists.
No.
In fact, I would say takes it in his stride. He doesn't seem that surprised that this place exists. More surprised that to find himself there, and to with the reality of it, the fact that there is not only a society there and the such seemingly blanket compliance on the surface, but also the fact there is a kind of community on the surface, a community spirit there. He meets old people who seem resigned to being there, who've lived a life in and worked, obviously in the same line of work that he had, and they're still there playing chess and whatever else. He meets a young woman who's working as a maid who seems to be that she grew up there. She was raised there. She'd never been anywhere else. And so he's taking all that in. He doesn't offer any judgment on any of that platoon. But the beauty of the performance and the script, the screenplay, I should say, is that even the silences, I think, leave us to process as he is.
They do. I mean, there's an element of like the Stepford Wives that comes into it, in the idea that the threat itself is not terribly dramatic. That the threat is that, I mean, if he gives in, if he caves in, if he gives them the information they need, the world won't end. He's not going to be murdered. There's not going to be explosions. There's nothing like, or there's no physical threat involved. The worst thing that's going to happen to him is that he becomes a smiling, vacant villager. And the whole plan, well, from what I've seen of it anyway, the means by which they try and get the information from him is, again, it's not really physical torment. It's not really conventional psychological torment either. It's, can we get you involved in the day-to-day life of the village? Because if you do that, eventually you are going to relax and you are going to become this vacant conformist person who just goes along with everything and will tell us anything we need to know. And you will live a happy life ever after, which is, that's subtle and quite sinister. I like that kind of spin on the threat, because it's not going to be painful for him. That the threat is pleasure, the threat is comfort, the threat is just being a boring, normal, everyday person.
Well, that was a message. That was the message that McGowan wanted to. I'm guessing now wanted to put across, that society. If you're not careful, you'll end up like the people in the village. Do you know what I mean? The governments will basically slam you down.
He says to number 2, doesn't he, when he's having one of his rants, and he says, I'm not a number, I'm a free man. And obviously that's a quote that's really associated with the show. And number 2 calls out to him, well, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's the same thing. Yeah. You're not a number, I'm a free. You're both.
Yeah.
And that gets left hanging in the air as well.
It's as I said, it's a deep show. I'm beginning to realise how deep it is now.
The truth of the matter is, this is such a hard one to talk about. I mean, I have actually thought about making dedicated content about this show, because each of these 17 episodes, there's enough texture, layers, characters, and moments in every single 47-minute episode. Certainly as much as you get in the average feature film. And I don't know whether it was, for all I know, Ian, I don't know whether some of these scripts were meticulously, he put hours and hours and slaved through the night writing them or not, or whether they were just furious sort of spillings out onto the page. Maybe it's a bit of both. I don't know.
I think he was way beyond his time, just like geniuses. They are always, aren't they? And then it gets ignored. You know, like you just got to go back a couple 10 years, whatever. Blade Runner. You know, Blade Runner was a huge flop when it came out, but now you look at it, you can see what Ridley Scott was trying to say, but he was way beyond his time. Same thing with McGowan. I mean, McGowan is a very clever man, as far the stuff that I've read about him anyway. I mean, he's been in Columbo like 3 times as the villain. You know what I mean? He ends up directing a couple of episodes of Columbo. He was directing some of this as well. You know, he wanted TV to be more deeper. He wanted the stuff that he was doing to be different. You know, he didn't want to follow the. He
believed in challenging people. I think,
exactly. You know, it's pretty good. Work ethic to have, actually.
I mean, whilst we watched, I think no matter when you found the show, we watched to get the answer to those simpler questions, certainly initially, and then I think you sort of hold with it because you wonder how more bizarre it can get. What's it going to say next time?
Yeah.
But generally, with McGowan, he used it as a way that the format and the idea of the conventional hero that people recognized, he knew he was bringing that baggage of familiarity from another show into this one.
Yeah.
If he looks the same, dresses the same haircut, then people would have that association and that bond with the role he'd previously played. And he could play with all these ideas, his various concepts on society, as you're saying, on politics, the rights of the rights of a sovereign individual, psychology. At this time, we were so the first Man on the Moon, that was 69, wasn't it? But during the late 50s through to the late 60s, there'd been this massive drive towards scientific understanding for everyone, so that everybody could find out more about science, about the human mind. And it seemed like McGowan was sort of thirsty for all of that and believed that we had a right to know these things about ourselves and explore these ideas, that they shouldn't be elitist talking points, that they involved us all, Ian.
Yeah, as I said, this show's so deep. I don't want to dive in it too much. I'll get lost.
We would be here forever. But even just the penny farthing, this symbol that we all see, it's on all the badges, it's on the end title sequence. That he chose that because he felt it symbolized the realities of progress, Platoon. Unwrap that one. It's enigma after idea after concept.
The actual score itself is absolutely brilliant, as far as I'm concerned. The score at the ending of the first episode, you got bits of the bits of the penny farthing appearing. It's a half of it's missing, and as the credits are going, it's getting to complete the penny farthing, which I think is really clever. And in those days, they had to animate that, didn't they? In those days, there weren't computers they can do that on. Literally had to draw it by hand. Literally had to stick the names on a card and then film it. So yeah, I mean, you got to take your hat off to all that stuff, haven't you? So. Yeah.
He threw absolutely everything at it, for better or worse. Was it brave or stupid, do you think, Platoon? Do you think anybody could ever try and make a show like this now?
I think it's very difficult to do that again, because in a way we are more conformist. In a way, what we have in movies at the moment is sort of what The Prisoner, to the extent it has a message, is trying to warn us against. It is much more bland and conformist, and we're also quite limited, I think, in our sort of aesthetic preferences and our aesthetic style. So one of the really quick and simple ways of achieving the surreal style that The Prisoner does is by taking so many very disconnected concepts and ideas and iconographies and just throwing them all together. So the penny farthing's a really good example. You have the penny farthing as the emblem of a village which is quaint and old-fashioned but run by a super high-tech with a sort of criminal organization with a control room which has the magic seesaw thing with viewing cameras. That's just a mishmash of various different concepts. The marching band playing nursery rhymes at a funeral on a beach, with people wearing really bright colored clothes but black umbrellas, which is very conventional. You're taking all of these incredibly different things, and not necessarily with direction, because if you give them direction, then it becomes more pastiche and less effective. But just blending these things together to be very bold and very inventive and creating something that is kind of in its own way quite uncomfortable to see. I don't think you could do that anymore. I think people would look at an attempt to do that and they would say, that person's trying too hard, or this just doesn't make sense, or the person doing it would be trying to convey a very overt point with it. There wouldn't be the subtlety required to allow the surrealism just to have its own purpose. So, no, I don't know that you would have that again outside of animation. Animation's a bit different. I think you can still find that kind of thing takes place in animation. But live action, no. It's so 60s. The 60s is such an experimental decade. We are not anymore living in an experimental decade.
It's
We're very
brilliant
uncomfortable.
because you got The Prisoner, and I think the Avengers mirrors it as well, because the Avengers wasn't made conventionally either. It was
quite surreal. Some episodes,
surreal.
It's had that slow walk from conventional into
and Prisoner is very surreal as well. Some scenes are very surreal. And I love that period of British TV. That period of British TV, we were really ruling. We were making our own stuff, weren't we? I mean, Louis Grade, you got to take out your hat to him. I mean, guy responsible for the Muppets, for God's sakes, So, yeah, I love that. And as I said, The Prisoner, wasn't really into it because it was really hard to understand when I was younger.
And
But
Ian, to be fair, it's only got screened. They used to repeat back then. Repeats weren't so common as they are now. So there were big chunks of like 10 years where you couldn't see the prisoner, where it wasn't repeated anywhere. So say it was shown in 67. Then I think it was repeated around 1975. So I probably on ITV, and then it was off television again until Channel 4 launched in the early mid 80s. Whenever that is, so it was on then. It turned up on the BBC, on BBC Two in the 90s. Andy, that's where you saw it.
Yeah.
And then we've got now it's pretty much everywhere. But
it's on BritBox right now, to be honest.
Is it on BritBox
that's how I was carried on watching it, because you sent me the first episode and I was like, I'm sure I've seen this on one of the streaming services, and it's on BritBox. So
I
there's
do
lots
wonder,
of people
Andy,
it out.
if he thought that entertainment was homogenized in the late 60s, what would he think of it now? And where are the titans like McGowan and like Lou Grade? Who would make stuff like this up?
Yeah, people are afraid to push the boundaries.
I don't think it's that, Andy. I think it's the crowd of today. Their attention span's very short. I mean, you have to. If you want to watch The Prison of the Pheasant, you have to sit down and watch it. And you have to watch it without your phone. You have to literally watch it to see what's going on. Yeah,
properly watch it.
But I think you don't even have writers that probably have the caliber to write it. And if you try to do something, because this, I mean, like I say, you can look at it from lots of different lenses, but it is quite political at the end of the day. I think it is, or the message it's trying to convey. And I don't think people are brave enough to write stuff like this anymore without being shot down.
The difference is, Andy, it's not party politics, is it? It's a different kind of politics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't watch that and tell you whether what his personal politics were. I could probably guess, but I couldn't say, oh, he's a conservative, he's Labour, he's this, he's that. I don't know, right? Which is great, because you say he's putting ideas out there and making you think, and I think that's why obviously people like Star Trek, old Star Trek, so much, because there's allegories out there and it just makes you think. Because I think the thing about his character is he's not completely a good guy. He's not a completely good guy in it either, is he? I mean, we know he's a spy. He's done questionable things, and he's trying to escape. He uses people, he tricks people. So he's not a typical hero action person that you would have found. He's not a John Steed, for instance, right? But we still root for him, and we still want him to get away, even though some of what he does is questionable within the village sometimes, and how he uses people. And I think that's great, because again, it always kept the audience on their toes to go, is he the guy that we think he is? And I think you don't see that.
Is he a hero worth believing in? And is he right to not tell them? What does this say about ourselves? What choice would we make? How far would we be able to be pushed?
Just because, I mean, I think the thing is like, just because you're content and you have everything, and the whole point is a prison doesn't make you, there's that whole. You might have everything, but you haven't got your freedom. So if you've got everything you want, you don't have to want for money. You've got your health, but you haven't got your freedom. And it's very conceptual, big.
Based on the pilot, I think what it was saying is that conformity is wrong. If you conform to what the village wanted, then
conform blindly, isn't it?
Yeah, creativity would be gone. Your choice, your freedom of choice would be gone. And I think that's what he was saying, really. Well, just based on the first episode, he was saying that conformity is wrong. Everybody's trying to make him conform, right? We want to know information. We give you a number. You've got your own house. Do you know what I mean? And it's
just that whole never lose your ability to ask, because it's like he might have conformed if the answers he got were like, actually, this is a good thing. But he was constantly kicking against it, going, well, why do I need to conform? Why do you need to know this information? Why am I doing this? And they wouldn't answer it. So he wouldn't answer it. So constantly in stalemate. And that was part of the, the whole dynamic of the show. So, it might have been a good thing, but I think it was more about him always question, always challenge. Don't take things at face value. This looks too good to be true. It is too good to be true. And, and I think that's very relevant today.
I think he wanted everything to be different. Even the car he comes out with in the beginning. It's like nothing like this in the road. It's like down there somewhere.
I love this. So he had to stick his arm indicate because it has no indicators on the car. So in London traffic now, you break your arm when you...
I know. Yeah, that car's amazing. Look at that.
Yeah,
That's
superb.
bloody
Is it a Lotus?
great.
I think it's a Lotus, isn't it?
I know what it is.
A Lotus Esprit, I think they're called. But it's it's very idiosyncratic. It's not the Batmobile, is it? You know, you'd struggle to get two people.
It's a great vehicle though. And actually, the tone of the show.
But one
there's a cleverness as well.
Personality. Sorry, LP.
No, after you.
No, I was just saying the fact that it's even a one-seater car is very telling of his personality. You know.
Yeah, he's a nonconformist from the beginning, even before he's having to put that really to the test. But I think one of the other clever things about it is that you're never entirely sure who exactly the bad guy, so to speak, is.
Yeah.
So you've got we know he works for a shady government organization. But the organization is sometimes played off against the people in charge of the village. So you don't know, you don't trust the people he used to work for. You don't trust the village. And you also don't trust that the village trusts the people he used to work for. What is he keeping a secret? Why is he keeping it a secret? Who and what is he trying to protect? Where are his loyalties? Are they just to himself? Or are they to the government that he used to work for, presumably? Or are they to somebody else, something else? You don't really trust anyone in this show. And that's what, again, keeps it especially interesting. It's something that stops you being able to pin a very definite political message on it, because there is no right side. It's all a mystery. It's all we know is, from his point of view, in the moment, he knows a secret which we don't know, and he has to keep that secret from everyone around him. And there are lots of people who are trying to get access to the information, potentially to use it against themselves, potentially to use it against somebody else, for, again, reasons we are unclear on. So it's ultimate mystery box stuff, but it's quite compelling.
And for all of the characters,
can I ask a question? So this character here, right?
Yeah, number 2.
The original guy that he was talking to in the beginning. Did I miss something? He disappeared and became him.
Pretty much every week there's a different number 2 because they can't. So number 2's set in to crack him basically, and when they can't, they disappear.
Yeah. Because the original guy was the guy that was in Ipris Files. He was Michael.
The actor Guy Dahlman played the initial number 2.
Yeah,
and some quite famous people play number 2.
Mary Morris, Darren Nesbitt, Leo McKern. George Baker later on in this, Anton Rogers. God, so many of them. But you're right. In here, we get 2 number 2s again to sell the premise, to hook people right away, and it's keeps. Some of them do come back. Leo McKern appears twice. There's another actor who appears twice as well. You'd know if you was to see his face. All 60 stalwarts, all a particular type. I think even Mary Morris is still a very particular type, has that kind of smiling but sinister countenance. It's all they're all of people that you wouldn't trust at all. But the thing is with this, I mean, what you were just saying actually, Platoon, got me thinking, because for all his bluster and his anger, and say nobody loses their shit like Patrick McGowan in The Prisoner, but all of that, I believe that this character, the reason why they can't break him, and why he persists, why he endures, is because for all of that, he believes in human beings and that he will find somebody that he can trust. There will be people that he will find allies. Eventually his trust will not be misplaced. And he keeps believing that right the way through.
He does, although that's again another way that they drum up the paranoia, British. Is that they seem to know that about him as well, which is why they will give him. So I think in the pilot episode, when you have the maid, for example, who comes in, and she's obviously supposed to be a deeply sympathetic character, trying to exploit his want for allies and whatever humanity he has within him, only to reveal not only was she a double agent and a spy, but actually when she seemingly broke down in front of him and told him something like the truth, that was all part of the act as well. So he hadn't actually cracked her. So him wanting to trust people, or at least wanting allies, is also his weakness. And so you will get this recurring cast of people who are given to him to form those attachments, but all to try and undermine him, which works against his potential want to make alliances and friendships. And then, of course, you get the constant change of number 2s as well. So anyone he seems to be striking up a relationship with, they will be probably gone in the next episode. So he has to start that again. He's not supposed to trust anyone, really. The whole mechanic of the thing is to break his trust in everyone, eventually including himself, and only by removing those sort of personal attachments, will you eventually engineer the kind of conformity that denudes him of any sense of loyalty.
Yeah, that's what they want, don't they? That's exactly what they want.
It's fascinating. And as you can tell, I mean, we have been going for nearly an hour talking about this, and there's so much that we haven't said. But this week all of us have seen Arrival. So this is the very first episode of The Prisoner, with a very simple pitch. Just as you said, Ian, after resigning, a secret agent finds himself trapped in a bizarre prison known only as the Village. And it was initially broadcast on the 29th of September 1967. It was written by George Markstein and David Tomblin. That's the official names on the list, and directed by Don Chaffee. Don Chaffee had worked on the ITC stable of shows for a few years. In fact, he directed an episode of Danger Man, which was kind of a precursor to this, and he picked it up for this one. But obviously, this is very. I think there's a lot of movement in it, just as you say, and they go from place to place to place to place, and we see people, but we meet them, but we don't get to know them.
It's the Oopa Loopa.
The butler,
guy,
played by Angelo Muscat, he's the only other actor who's in every single episode of The Prisoner. Everybody else changes, and obviously some of the sets the same, some of the sets are reused. So this episode really does rip along. It's simple in some respects, but it's hitting us with so much uncanniness and the unsettling feeling, Andy. I think it builds. I think it builds, and we get markers like we do get a fist fight in this, like any action show of the era. We also get, you just mentioned it. We get the femme fatale with the tear in her eye. So we got things that people have seen elsewhere. To me, it's okay. I know where I am now. This is an action show. And they don't notice, or they forget the mystery box stuff just for a few minutes, Platoon, and they think they're watching a normal show, and then it wrong foots people again. There's so much going on in just this 47 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you're never supposed to understand really anything about the place. And in the clips that you've got there, I mean, you see the statue of Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders, but then there's a whole section where he's going through the avenue of statues, and the statues are drawn from everywhere and anywhere. And so you can't even get any sense of sort of cultural familiarity to it, because you will see things that are deeply familiar to you next to things that they've never been placed next to anywhere in the world before, which just completely shatters any sense of place you might be trying to build up. And that's deceptively clever. It's a tiny little thing, but it's all designed to stop you ever understanding exactly what it is you're watching, and therefore, paradoxically, wanting to watch more of it to see if you will ever learn what it is.
But that's the thing, you see. This is I don't think it was received very well when it actually appeared the first time round, because they want, critics want answers. If the critics don't understand it, then they're gonna bad mouth it, I guess. But if that was his intention, that there was no answers whatsoever, and you were never going to get any answers anyway, that's a brilliant thing.
Well,
but you can see why people don't understand it.
I do have that coming up. I mean, with this opening episode, what I felt about it, and what I always seem to feel about it, is surprise and a kind of vindication that my love for this show, and I absolutely love The Prisoner. I've seen it a couple of dozens of times, and that is. And I make up an appointment to go back to it. I make sure I go back and watch this, Andy, at intervals every few years, knowing that I'm going to see something else in it. And even though Ian's right, there's a lot of running around in this episode, and there's moments of quiet, and maybe it's a little rough around the edges. And yet there's things in this for this viewing that I don't remember noticing before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I first saw this. When I first saw it, Andy, I was in my early teens, and I even though I was talking earlier to you about it being repeated, I didn't watch it on TV. I watched it on VHS. The VHS tapes were lent to me by one of my oldest friends. His dad had got them all. He said, "I've been watching this show. My dad loves it. You'd love it too." And he lent me these videotapes, and I couldn't. I watched the first two all in one sitting, and I had to say, "Can I have the next one? Can I have the next one? Can I have the next one?" And I couldn't possibly. What you were talking about earlier on about the political side to it. I knew what politics was. It's what people talked about on that Question Time show that my teacher talks about all the time. It's on after I go to bed. So I knew that those things existed, but I didn't understand them. And so initially when I saw this, I was swept up in the fact it was like nothing else and that it was an adventure show. But every time I come back to it, including watching just that pilot this week, I see lots of little things that I'd never seen before.
Oh, totally. I mean, like I say, there's so much detail to the village, and like you say, the different accents and languages, and I think the thing is, like, they've done a really good job of, and as much as yes, there was lots of running around, but there's nothing when you first see the village. There's nothing really obvious that would stop you from leaving. I mean, the people, I'll say, are all mixed ages, generally quite old, nothing particularly threatening. You know, there's not obviously guns around, so they had to set up the premise quite quickly that actually it's impossible to leave, and like you do seem like swimming and climbing and
apart from
all
that
kinds
gardener
of things, you know.
did you notice the gardener who he seems to be clones? There's two of them, so he meets one in his house and then he meets the other one going up the stairs. It's like, whoa.
Do you know what always makes me laugh? My brother and myself used to laugh at it when they rerun it, is when he hits the table, the teacup goes up like that. It's obvious that they pitched the table, really bumping the teacup, and it lands in the same spot. Really brilliant.
I think the pilot just does such a good job of just setting up the whole premise to the thing. You know, we like at the end of that episode, like you say, we just want to see the next one. We know he's been taken there because he's resigned. There's no obvious way he can get off because we've got these rover things everywhere. We don't know where it is. There's all these languages, and why do they want? You know, I mean, it's because it's not a particularly long pilot. You think most pilots these days like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
it's to get that much information in and hook you in so quickly. I think it is a cracking piece of writing, and like I say, there's almost not really that much dialogue when you think about it.
A lot of people forget how stylish it is. In the beginning, right? He deliberately picked that car, and then there's that shot where he's walking down the corridor in silhouette.
Yeah.
I mean, how stylish can you get for the 60s? Then he opens that door, that picture that you showed, and you have that streak of light behind him. Do you know what I mean?
Cracking director.
It's all very. I would like to think it's all thought out.
So he obviously handpicked everybody who worked on it, just as he handpicked every single aspect of the production, including what some would arguably would insist is the real star of the show, the village of Port Merion in North Wales, which is the real life location of the village. Provided the backdrop to the show, people describe the architecture as surreal. Anyway, but I've been to Port Merion a few times, and it has got this Mediterranean kind of atmosphere that's legitimate. It's not something that McGowan and the directors are putting on screen. That's genuine when you're there. And so if you can translate that and take it to the screen and make the audience feel like they're there, they're isolated even, but also add in those elements, sort of the tannoys and the surveillance cameras and that sort of lift music that's everywhere. Again, you've got this contrast, which is, you know, I want to submit. Aspects of myself are telling me I should want to be here.
Where was it shot? The village, where is it? Yeah,
it's in Wales.
It's in North Wales. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought everybody knew that. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It's shot in North Wales.
That's really interesting to what Ian was just saying about how the opening shot. So actually, when he's free, it's all very dark and very moody and very oppressive.
Yeah.
But then he gets to the village where he's a prisoner, but it's very bright and very colourful and very. So the two things, like, you know, he's sort of juxtaposition. It was like when he's got all this freedom, but it's very dark and oppressive, and then when he is actually in prison, but it's all bright and colourful. And I think that's a really clever bit of.
No, you're right. And I'm just thinking, I've never thought of it like that before. But if you think about the moment before the gas comes through the keyhole, before he's taken away, the last thing he sees are gleaming 1960s tower blocks stretching out into the sky. The ultimate expression of modernity as it was at the time. And then he wakes up, just as you say, in paradise.
Well, what's interesting?
And he hates it. He wants to get away from it. It's great.
If Patrick McGowan wrote all of this and he was in charge of all this, I've got to take my hat off to him. Because some of the imagery in the beginning, like for instance, when they've got his photograph and they're making the X go right across his photograph, that tells you everything. That tells you he's gone. You know what I mean? He's been fired, or something's going to happen to him. By using the X, it's right across his picture. It's all the imagery is really well done. And as I said, if it was Patrick McGowan that was completely in charge of this, It's genius stuff. It really is. The first 2 minutes tells you the story of the backstory within 2 minutes, and that's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, Little Platoon, you've only seen 6 or 7 episodes of this. You know, I really envy you because there's so much left, good stuff that you haven't seen. And don't get me wrong, there are some episodes of The Prisoner that I don't like, but even those episodes, and as it goes on and reaches its conclusion, if you think things are trippy now, you wait and see where it goes. But the beauty of it
especially the last episode. Oh my god,
the stuff I don't like, it's worth. It's still so compelling. You cannot take your eyes away from it, and you can't stop thinking about it after the fact.
No, I'm sure. I mean, I probably will actually go and watch the rest of it after this is over, because I've been meaning to have something on in the background anyway. I would recommend it to. Oh no, not background till this. Background when I'm working afterwards. Take my mind off actual work. But no, it's. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to try and create this slightly sort of hyper real, unreal, isolated community and anything. And there are so many works of fiction that do it anyway. You can use it in so many different storytelling devices. The other one that always comes to mind for that sort of very surreal isolation is always The Wicker Man and Summerisle there. But if you want an example of how to do that and to really convey this essential otherness of the place you're depicting, The Prisoner is a really good watch. You don't necessarily have to like what it's doing. You don't really have to like its storytelling method. Some people do prefer to have the answers. But even if you don't necessarily like what the show is doing in terms of its writing, just pay attention to what it's doing with its world building and how it's depicting all of these things, how it really conveys its strangeness, and how it can completely shatter your own trust in reality. And so much of it, if not all of it, is visual storytelling. So it's a brilliant example for that.
I mean, look at the shot that you just pulled up there, Dan, with the colours and he's like he's on a chess piece or something.
Yeah,
it's so well composed, that shot, and the shot in the beginning where you see the X's go through the picture, and then you have that really long corridor of all those drawers, and that thing comes all the way from the back, and it comes all the way up, and the drawer opens, and they drop his thing in there.
Well, it's like the Indiana Jones thing, isn't it? With the Raiders of the Lost Ark, all the crates. It's the same. It's almost as if there's so much of it. Any resistance from the machinery of this is completely futile, because ultimately we're just one picture that's easily crossed out, stuck in a manila folder and shoved in a drawer, which is just one of dozens of exactly the same drawers.
The point I'm trying to make is that for that one shot, which lasts 3 seconds, that shot is so well composed.
It's extraordinary.
If you look at that shot, it's so well composed, and every shot in the beginning sequence that tells you what's going on, incredibly well composed. Now, if it's all Patrick McGoohan, I'm sorry, but that guy was a genius. Well before his time.
And you'll be pleased to learn, Ian, most of it was deliberate too. The only thing that wasn't is, and I've heard you sniggering already, the only thing that wasn't is Rover. Rover, the nefarious, sinister balloon that makes its way through the pathways of the village and onto the beaches and wherever, patrolling as they do. This whole idea of Rover, this sort of guard dog kind of character there. Now, initially, they had a prop, and they were using it right to the very day that Arrival was being filmed. But they got it to the location. They got it to the location. We saw this hovercraft thing, and they come to the conclusion it was completely unusable. It wasn't fit for purpose, and they obviously spent, in relative terms, a lot of money on that, with the flashing light and the dopey kind of the little curtain across the bottom. And they had to come to a pretty short term and simple substitute. And what about a balloon? We can pull it along on a wire. This would have looked on 60s televisions on 4:3, the size that screens were then. This would have looked completely sort of dead white, if you know what I mean. We would, now in HD, we can see the dimples on things like this, Andy. But back then, it's just this bright white shape.
And actually, when it catches them though, and you've got the whole, it's pulling across the face. It's even a little bit like creepy now, isn't it? To be honest, like it's like suffocated and. All
but sorry, the director and me, and watching this show, I even I have to bow to McGowan's genius. The way that thing's introduced was the water that was sprouting up. Suddenly you see a small balloon, then it suddenly pulls out, and the huge balloon's on top of, I can't remember what was on top of, some building. And it bounces down. I mean, it's either the editor that made that work, or it's McGowan's.
But they wrote it in as well, because when it's introduced, that there is a scene where they have to obviously impose it over a still shot. But they write it into the show in a way that emphasizes the sort of the pawns on the chessboard thing, because the number 2 at the time commands everyone to stop. And then, of course, that gives them the opportunity and the excuse to use a still frame and then to impose the balloon on top of that. And then he says, you can carry on, and off they go again. The footage starts. Which, if you were paying less attention as a writer or as a director, you wouldn't necessarily have done that. You would have thought, well, I can just get away with using a still shot. But actually, by emphasizing the control that number 2 has over every constituent in the village, they've managed to make it work. I still find the balloon is a little bit too out there for me personally. I'm waiting for Joe Biden to fire a missile at it, but it's unquestionably strange though, so it does sort of fit the overall thing.
It does also. What makes me laugh as well, because in the 60s the crew mostly wore what they like, suits and stuff, and today everybody's in jeans and caps and stuff. But the British, they always still, especially the director, he wore a suit and stuff like that. So I love that period of time. Tell you the truth, the 60s. It fascinates me, completely fascinates me. But there you go. I still think it's a great show, though. It is a good show. I'm gonna start watching them now, because after talking about it, I've got to.
You know what?
I've got to see how much genius is.
We have barely scratched the surface of this. I knew it would be the case with this show, so it may be worth us coming back to and maybe making this an umbrella theme or something. But yeah, there's so much to talk about, so much to see, and the effect of it all on the viewing public was huge. It was massive, and the cultural impact too was also considerable, stretching out to this very day. We've had dedicated episodes of shows like the Simpsons 2.4 Children, and the kids show Reboot. All 3 of those shows have done actual full tribute episodes to the prisoner. We've had rock pop bands like Supergrass and Squeeze have both. Oh, and Iron Maiden, as well. They've all filmed music videos at Port Merion with a very sort of prisoner bent. Everybody's in black blazers, Andy, and rovers roaming around, and all that sort of stuff's kicking off. So you've got all that.
Yeah.
And now and again, broader media has also given it a nod too. So here we are with a little ad break. So check out some of the broad cultural impact of The Prisoner here.
The official Prisoner fact file.
I am not a number. I am a free man.
Collect every classic episode on digitally remastered DVD.
Has anyone ever escaped?
Along with an exclusive collector's edition magazine.
You are number 6.
Which uncovers the groundbreaking themes, characters, and technology behind this unique series.
You seeing you?
Start your official Prisoner fact file collection at newsagents now for just $2.99.
Begin surveillance. Closer. Number 21 shows ambitious tendencies. Follow him. Closer. Looks different. What's going on? Why can't they catch him? "21's escaped!"
Escape to the totally new Renault 21.
Welcome back. Yes, we've been talking about The Prisoner, the classic 1967 cult drama, spy, thriller, sci-fi adventure series with something for everybody, I think, in that list. And there are people watching and listening to all of this, believe it or not, all of this stuff that we've been out with over the last hour or so. Should we go and check in and see what they've got to say over in the live chat? See what pearls of wisdom they've managed to glean from our rambling. Thank you to everybody who's joined us on this edition of the show so far. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, particularly if you're new here, or check that you're still subscribed because, you know, what YouTube are like. And let's get stuck in and see what people have got to say. Thank you, everyone. Oh, scrolling right the way back. Got lots of hellos as always, and lots of people saying hello to one another, which is always nice too. We do have a nice community here, Ian, of people and of friends and fellow fans. God, it's jumping as I'm scrolling. This has obviously got people talking. Not Brian Young says, evening all. Evening, Brian. No, not Brian. Are you Brian or you're not Brian? I don't know.
It's not Brian.
Lots of quotes. I won't go through them all, but I'll just say to the time scales, by hook or by crook, we will. Of course we will. Of course we will. Call me Chatto. Hi, Chatto. Hi, Chatto. Hey, love this guy.
Love your channel.
Yeah, good stuff. In fact,
very funny stuff. Great.
Come and talk to us on the Facebook. Call me Chatto said the two best shows of all time, Prisoner and Sandbaggers. He's a man of great distinction and taste. Wow. Okay, you've just shot up in my estimation.
Even heard of Sandbaggers? I'm going to have to.
No, I've not heard of Sandbaggers.
It's a deep cut, and it's what if you think this is a strange show, this is a real slow burner.
Okay.
So, nice one, Chatto. Those are two great
Check
picks.
it out.
Hi, Ian. The Prisoner is one BBC classic that we did get in the States. It was on PBS alongside Doctor. It wasn't a BBC show; it's an ITV show, but you were close. Hiya, Peter. Peter Davis says, "I am not a number. I am a free man." I think we could be quite a while with all that sort of stuff. What else is here? Is The Village? We've got this one from Z3PO who said, "The Village is Royston Vaser."
Legal gentleman, bro.
Take it seriously, Z, for heaven's sake.
It's a local shop for local people.
Chatto says the ending tied up the allegories, not the stories. That's the mistake people make. Beautifully put. We're going to hear what McGowan had to say about that in a couple of minutes, but actually I think yours is slightly better, but he was put on the spot. We'll see that in a moment. Welcome aboard, Little Platoon from Lord Thoth.
Thank you very much.
And they're a nice crowd, really. If just don't feed them after 8, you know what may happen. Hello, all there from Peter. Dark Shadow Logan says, my favourite show that has so much meaning to today. It absolutely does. Peter watched it all last year, Andy. The Prisoner is timeless.
Yes.
And sadly falls into today's political beliefs. That's kind of something that you were pointing to.
Now. I really think it's more relevant now than it was when he wrote it back then. You know, if you really want to get into the deep darkness of it and our political wasteland. But yeah, I think it's so relevant these days that it should be on curriculums.
Dark Shadow Logan speculates here that Rover was secretly cheering number 6 on. Do you think the silent ally? Do you think that could be? That's one way of reading that, isn't it, Little Platoon?
I think I'd have to watch the rest of the show before I could answer that one, but I'll take your word for it.
The intense portrayal at times of Patrick McGowan did, I think, from what I've heard from interviews and things said, he almost had a nervous breakdown making this, and it was there was no Logan, there was no almost about it. This did drive Patrick McGowan to a mental breakdown, total psychosis, to the point where the intensity we spoke of earlier on, I'm really condensing this down, which seems unfair with something as serious as mental health. You know, I would never demean that in any way. But McGowan, he eventually was forced to step away from the show. And he one episode complete, he didn't even play number 6 in. But this is why the last few episodes are so scattershot and so on the surface undisciplined, was partly a manifestation of McGowan's mania, I suppose you could say, in trying to get to a finishing line. In all fairness, he initially only wanted to make, I don't know if you're aware of this, Platoon, initially McGowan only wanted to make 12 episodes of this, but it was Gray that insisted on more, because then he could sell them internationally. If there was ideally 18, he settled for the 17.
I read that before coming on here, and it's a bit of a shame, I think, especially You can understand why. I mean, the American market in particular, certainly during the well, it will always be huge, but in the 60s, if you can crack America as a British TV producer, you've done a pretty good job. But that tendency that American dramas have just to go on and on and on and on and on, and you have to extract the maximum dollar value out of absolutely everything, often to the detriment of the story you're trying to tell, which sounds like it might actually have happened in this case, given that it went on so long that he went mad, and then apparently the last episodes are not perhaps the best. It is a shame. It would have been better I think, if they'd trusted the British tendency to do shorter but sweeter productions. Then again, you can understand why, if you get really in love with a show for the first 5 episodes, you never want it to end. But actually, all things have to, and it's better that they end in the right time than too late.
That's just the tip of the iceberg with this. Even the running order is contentious amongst Prisoner fans, because McGowan has a set order of where those episodes should come in, but there's even 2 of those. So the original 12 and the full 17. So people know this stuff to the most minute detail, and they get very cross when you get a little bit of it wrong. Please, everybody, if we have got any of it wrong, I'm certainly not an expert. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the cloister bell for more notifications about whatever we're talking about next, by all means. Dark Shadow Logan's got a good point. The writing, I don't think, is dated. It has a lot of meaning from when I grew up through the 70s and the 80s, and a lot of meaning today. Peter mentions the uniform. Andy, you were talking about that. The outfit's become a uniform. It's casual wear, isn't it? It's Millet's wear.
Colour.
But it's all about conformity. Yeah.
The first episode was about conformity, wasn't it? I remember when he went into that office with the first number 2, and he had that sign on the wall saying, "A still tongue makes happy life." Do you remember that? It said on the blackboard.
Yeah,
which is interesting because
said to him by someone as well.
Yeah. So it is about conformity. The first episodes definitely, but anyway.
We're also joined by the writer Will Hadcroft, Ian, who says it was 2 very different shows, depending on whose view of it you listen to. George Markstein, who saw it as a spy drama, and McGowan, who saw it as symbolizing the individual versus society. I understand that he had his relationship with the other writers. Writers don't like it when you rewrite their work, do they? And particularly when they've got a lot of credits. The whole thing on the original series of Star Trek, with Roddenberry rewriting everybody, including Harlan Ellison, it didn't go down well there. It didn't go down well here either.
Yeah. Again, that's all about filmmaking. There's all politics that's played in filmmaking and stuff, like, especially when you're working for an organization or Hollywood, whatever. There's always politics. So, I'm not surprised really at all. That was a somber note, wasn't it?
Even the beast seeing you takes on a sinister form of goodbye in the shape we are watching. Yeah, that's another constant throughout the show, isn't it, Andy? That hand signal, you did that very well. Too well.
Yeah. Because initially he sort of mocks it a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then
But he even not noticed that even when he got into that costume, his stuff was dark. Everybody else was colourful. Everyone around him was all colours, when they red, yellows.
He's like the black or beige, isn't he?
Yeah,
nothing else.
Kind of stood out. Yeah. So,
well, initially, I always thought that this hand signal was something that was deliberately twee and sort of and British, another manner, another kind of Britishism, another mannered bit, like sort of like tipping your bowler hat on your way to work, that kind of thing.
There's a line, I think it's in the first episode, or it might be the second episode. There is a line, I think, where somebody observes that it's a bit like a salute, and he says, "Yeah, it kind of is like a salute." It's not. It's cheerful on the surface, but even the iconography is that you're being watched. You have to do it because that's the expectation of conformity. It's not something that you're doing because you genuinely like the person you're doing it to. They say just as a matter of rote that it's a lovely day, and someone might respond, whether it's true or not, that the rain will come later or whatever it is. So it's all designed to be quite sort of disturbingly artificial, pleasant but very deeply unpleasant underneath.
Yeah, don't scratch under the surface, isn't it?
I think it also says that despite the fact, because those tannoys and cameras are there, and everybody in the village knows that they're there, they know they're being watched. They probably know they're being recorded too. It's all very out in the open. But as you were saying, they're also encouraged to conform in every way. But there's a line in this where number 6 says, I intend to find out who are the jailers and who are the prisoners, because you literally can't trust, nobody can trust anybody else. And so when they make that gesture and say, we'll be seeing you, they're effectively saying, I am watching you. So everybody is watching everybody else, and you literally can't trust the person you just bought your loaf of bread from that morning.
But it's a tyranny of niceness, in the sense that all of this is done with the best surface intentions. Like, you're supposed to be lovely to everyone. When the Tannoy announces that it's 15 minutes to curfew, which in a 1984 style novel would be a terrifying thing enforced by people on the streets with batons, in this, much like in something like Brave New World, curfew is starting in 15 minutes, so we're going to play you some lovely relaxing music to get you ready for bed. And it's all coddling, and it's all very sort of family friendly, but it's all so very superficial. You know what happens if you go against the tyranny of the niceness.
Yeah, it's like, we know what's best for you, so now you're going to go to bed, now you're going to get up, and now you're going to eat this, and now you're going to exercise. It's that very regimented, isn't it? Like you say, the veneer is very, this is in your best interest, but we actually know
it's one of the things. Yeah, as you say, and it's one of the things that makes it especially relevant today. I mean, I'm not a number, I'm a free man is a good sort of rebellious slogan for any time or any era. But today, when you get massive programs of public control, which are always done in the name of public health, public safety, public decency, public morals, everything has to be very nice. We're all about your welfare. We're all trying to be safe for you. We're going to make the world safe for you to live in. That makes this very relevant again, because underneath this pleasant facade is something which is fundamentally quite controlling. You can agree with the measures if you want to, but you should be fully aware of why they're being implemented. Otherwise, you shouldn't just be lulled into this sense of security, which is that everyone has your best intentions at heart, because by and large they don't.
That's true.
Totally.
The Darren Zone says The Prisoner is a fascinating and unique series.
Where we were told we weren't allowed to question things, so...
You saw it on Channel 4 as a rerun in the 90s, huh?
I think I might have caught a little of that as well. I've just been sort of...
I saw it on BBC Two.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, I didn't warm to it. Wasn't an opinion at the first time.
The series would be considered problematic today, says Matthew Pounder. Anything that questions the narrative is. And again, that's true. People are very happy, it seems. There's a large section of very, very vocal people who are all for conformity, all for censorship, and who you couldn't trust.
Are you saying the BBC is the village?
Well, they were all saying it as well, because it's they know better than us, and it's our best interests, and that's why they say this should be an all school curriculum. This show is like, what do you think this means?
Will Hadcroft to the rescue here with the quote that I tried to remember and forgot eventually anyway. His reply in Arrival as to his resignation was that it was a matter of personal principle to him, and that's all they need to know. Yeah. And I think this is a certain mould of Britishness that is still, I do think it's still present in this country today.
But the more I think about it, the more I realise it is about conformity. Because do you remember that scene where they gave him the round peg? And so they said, put the round peg in the hole. So when so he deliberately does it the other way, doesn't he? He goes to the square and he tries to put it in a square hole, and it turns into a circle, doesn't it? And he ends up putting it in the right peg. So it is definitely about conformity. That he's obviously against conformity. That's exactly what the first episode's all about. I mean, it's so clever though. The more I think about it, the more I envy Patrick McGoohan, because some of the ideas is pure genius, isn't it? Some of the ideas that he had in this show, I can only base it on the first the pilot episode that I saw. And as I said, when I think about it more, I think there's some great stuff in there that I'm thinking about now.
Yeah. Well, you think one of our biggest complaints of modern shows, the amount of times we sit on here where everything is just everybody chat and explain. This whole pilot was pretty much show, don't tell. Everything was very visual, and we all got what was going on. No one needed to explain it to us because we were stupid. We grasped exactly what was going on just by people showing us things, showing us the village, showing us the map, showing us the signs on the walls, you know, not somebody pointing it out and reading it to him and then he's reading it back and, oh, what does that mean? Well,
completely organically,
that, you know?
the performances, the script, and the way it's presented tell us anything that we need to know.
Everything that's missing from modern storytelling.
Efficiency.
But also,
lean efficiency.
Also, which is interesting as well, is that when he does put the circle and the square turns into a circle, he's talking to that actor, which is a known actor, but I can't remember his name. And he has that wooden thing, doesn't he? That stand-in where it's kind of everything's moving because of the way it's shaped and everything. Yeah. And he literally destroys it, doesn't it? Because that wherever that thing is, it has a logic to it, doesn't it? And it can only go one way. And so he destroys that too, doesn't he? In other words, he's not conforming. He refuses to conform.
And they know he won't.
When I think about this, it's blowing my mind. The show's blowing my mind.
They admit that he doesn't have to need to be there for that. That is all theatrics too, because they've already got the information they need for that in the folder anyway. They just want to take that opportunity to sort of to crank it up a little more for him again, to put the pressure on, to conform, to comply, to get with the program almost.
It's like they just want to see how he'd behave, isn't it? Is that what they say? They just want to see how he'd react or behave.
Put things into practice. He's like a rat running through a trap. One of those mazes they put them in. A mouse. Get your mouth into gear, Hadley. The timescale says, can one visit this village today? You absolutely can, my friend. Port Merion in North Wales. It's still home to the 6 of 1 prisoner convention every year, where they reenact the chess game from that episode, and they also do lots. They have a dance.
Composed. Look how well that shot is composed. It's amazing.
This is a fan photograph. This is actually from the show.
Okay.
This is photography. This is only about 5 years ago in Port Merion, North Wales. So this is the fans heading out there and reenacting an episode. They do a lot of that kind of thing, and they hold conventions there. All sorts of stuff goes on through 6 of 1. They're very, very dedicated, and it's a big fan base for a show that hasn't aired any new episodes in all that time. Lots of loyal support. More comments here from Will Hadcroft again. Yeah, it's near Port Maddock. Yeah, it's beautiful. It looks lush on Blu-ray. Absolutely does. Matthew Pounder will. I recommend.
I like how you very delicately avoided having to try and pronounce the Welsh name at the beginning of that last comment.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't my first barbecue, my friend. No. Time is money and all that. Time is money. Life is a game of chess, in fact, as Peter Harrington advises, reminds us. It probably is. It probably is. Millennials are all villagers, says Matthew Pounder. Well, wouldn't be for me to say. I think that could be a trifle unfair, but I know what you're saying. Rover frightened me when I first saw it as a boy, says Will. So yeah, you are there. It did have the power to scare people there. There's a music festival held at Port Merion. Yes, I've forgotten about this. It's called Festival Number 6, where people get shit-faced and they bang tambourines and play folk music and stuff like that. And they have dance festivals and all sorts of things there. It's remarkable thing. I think what else there is to get through. What should we prioritize when it comes to this show? Let's have. I don't know whether to play this video actually, because particularly as Little Platoon is going to watch the rest of it. Would you like to hear what Patrick McGowan said when he was finally pressed about the meaning of the show? Are you interested in that?
Yeah, very much.
Would you like to see that? Okay, so I've got this now. Reception to the final episode of The Prisoner. It didn't go well, Ian, just as you've said. The public were captivated by the show, and they wanted to know the answers to the questions. They wanted the prisoner to escape. They wanted him to be free. They were rooting for him. Of course they were. When
they wanted the show to conform. They wanted a TV show to conform. That's what they wanted.
They absolutely did. It's funny. You should say that. So, but when the final episode was delivered, McGowan was met with anger on the streets. People were stopping in the street and shaking their fists and wagging their fingers. What was all that about? Blah 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 blah. People were ferociously disappointed
And
in
they
it.
crashed the switchboard that they had back then at ITC.
Did, yeah.
That people, because imagine how reserved the British are. That they'd be so angry they'd get up and walk to the phone and dial a number.
Yeah,
That's how angry they were. It's like,
Yeah. I won't say that's the reason that Patrick McGowan fled the country, but he did go and make a new life in the States from there on. And as you said, Ian, he very much extended his career, but he did come back to Great Britain, and he spoke to Mike Smith on a Saturday night entertainment show. I think it was the Noel Edmonds Late Late Breakfast Show, and we've got that clip here now. Check this out. Where are you?
Episode,
It's a slow one.
He was the 17th part in The Prisoner, and when it got there, a lot of people seemed to think that they hadn't got satisfaction out of that last episode. They still didn't know who the prisoner was, why he was trapped in there, who was trapping him, and who was number one. Is there ever going to be a conclusion to that?
That was the conclusion, what you saw. That's why it's still confusing. The reason that it was confusing and that they were disappointed, I think, is because they expected the ending to be similar to the Bond thing with this mystery man, the head man, whatever they call him in Bond. And, of course, it was about the human being, essence, and ourselves. It is within each of us. The dangerous thing on earth is what is within us.
Wow.
And so, therefore, that's what I made number one, oneself. An image of himself.
That cracked up there. I didn't really understand.
That all clear
what
now?
you were saying there. No, well, the thing is,
it's been edited there.
He's my God, his brain must be working overtime and everything. I mean, he's a very intelligent chap, as you could see, and he knew what he was doing, and as I said, it's the audience, because the audience didn't understand, obviously, they're going to be angry, aren't they? But
I mean, I always took it that I'm trying not to give too much away for Little Platoon, but so his front door back in London. So I just took it that we're all in a village of our own making. It doesn't matter where you are. We're kind of all in a village anyway. Whether you're physically there or you think you're free, you're not actually free. That's kind of what I took from it. I have no idea. So that's right or wrong, or that's kind of how but the number one reveal, I think, that was probably where most people lost their minds.
Well, that's the culmination. That's the culmination of that's the culmination of 4 or 5 episodes, which get more and more bizarre by the week. So I think people were holding tight. Because they're a challenge. They're a challenge that they're all. If you look back at the girl who was death at Once Upon a Time, they're all really, really out there. And so you finally get to this final. And I veered when it comes to the final episode. At times I've watched it and thought it was brilliant. Other times I've watched it and thought it was absolute drivel. It's probably somewhere in between. But McGowan was very, very clear then. On the very few occasions where he did talk about it, he was always. Not firm, but he's very clear there, isn't it? There's no mixing of words. He's not being mealy mouthed in any way. He's not ducking the question. It's there. And it's up to us whether we take that or not and do whatever we want. Use it to inform our viewing or to think on further. I don't know. I mean, did that surprise you, Little Platoon? What do you think about him, McGowan, speak on that day? Because people were waiting for that for 20 years.
I can see why people would have been disappointed with that. Most people are more comfortable and prefer a traditional narrative with a traditional narrative end than what he was trying to do there, for what it sounds like anyway. It actually does answer all the things that he wanted it to answer. If the reason for the prisoner being the prisoner to begin with is that he leaves because of a personal reason, actually, all you need to know is that the personal reason, you don't need to know what the personal reason was. The fact that the personal reason was enough to get him placed in the village and was the subject of such passionate interest by the people who wanted to crack him is conveying everything he wanted it to convey. Ultimately, a society which is uncomfortable with the self and with individuality cannot allow a personal reason to exist. The personal reason must be collectivized. It must be understood. Yeah. Whether or not you need that information to accomplish anything else is irrelevant. All that he's trying to convey is that you're not allowed to have your own personal thoughts, beliefs, wishes, and ideas, because those are innately dangerous to the conformist society. Yeah. So I like that. I think you can marry the two. You probably could. I've not seen the end episode, obviously, but I think you probably could have, by the sounds of it, done a slightly more compelling narrative end as well as conveying that. But he was interested in conveying that message first and foremost, and it sounds like he did get what he wanted. Whether it satisfied the audience or not is a different matter.
Yeah, I don't think it did. It obviously didn't. And the answer, after doing a deep dive into just one episode, I think he's very clever, and I think it's genius piece of TV making. It really is. I mean, I can see what he's getting at now. When I watched this a couple of days ago, I enjoyed it, but I just, the stuff that we're talking about now went way over my head. Now thinking about it, I think there's loads of things in there that actually shouts that it's all about conformity. That's exactly what he was trying to say in the first. I haven't seen the others. I think I've seen one a long time ago, and I can't remember.
Could be. We'll have to do a straw poll and see if it's worth revisiting this, I think, Andy.
Definitely. It's about conformity and mind control, and not just how we look, but same think and all that sort of George Orwell type stuff. It's lots of layers. Like I say, I think it's great that you, like say, as a teenager in the 90s, I could just sort of watch it more as a spy, bit surreal, Avenger-y type show, and then come back to it as an adult and realize all these layers are in there as well. You could just watch it on so many levels. It's not like, you have to go. You could just sit there and watch and enjoy it if you want to leave your brain at the door, but you can also switch your brain on and get so much more out of it. And that's really clever writing in itself.
Also, I just thought of that bit where, as well, he's the guy that was in the hospital.
Oh, Cobb.
Yeah, he was playing him as well, wasn't he?
It's funny how we know his name. They say his name. Yeah, Paul Eddington played Cobb in that.
It's clever, isn't it? It's like you can't trust anyone. It's like the government. You can't trust the government either. So it's like it's a load. I'm realizing there's loads of levels to this one episode.
I'd even say if you went back now and watched Arrival again. If I'm still finding you stuff in it after 30 years and after watching, I no exaggeration, I must have watched this all the way through 30 times, maybe more. But the whole thing has obviously endured and grown a fan base which is still supported by the 6 of 1 Appreciation Society there with all their various activities. But there's been so many books written about the prisoner, full books trying to decode it, trying to unravel it, unwrap it. And now, to me, Andy, it's so much fun to watch. Depending on what frame of mind I'm in, I'll go for the intellectual side, or I'll go for this is just all really cool. There's lots of punch-ups, or the women in the tight sweaters are all very sexy. That does it for me. So all those things all work for me. But there's lots of books, real academic books going into it, as well as populists, paperback books as well. There's been a small trickle, a steady trickle over the decades of tie-in merchandise. These are just some of the books that have been put out, factual books and adaptations, extensions of stories, and a whole book called I Am Not a Number that was written by Alex Cox, the film director, Ian. So he wrote that. It's his favourite show. So that's a fraction of the books that have been written about it.
R&B recommends that book. He's got that
really.
book.
I think it came out about 8 years ago, something like that. Comics too. There was a comic book sequel called Shattered Visage by Dean Motter. I collected those every issue as it came out back in the late 80s. I think it was about 88.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they collect it together now, Ian, as a trade paperback. And the artwork's not like anything else you've ever seen. And recently, Titan Comics, they put out a series too. So it continues to grow in that respect. There's been, there was a... Now, this is something that I know people do get angry about, because as precious as McGowan was about the prisoner, he never necessarily intended to leave it there. He was never as precious about it as I think a lot of the fans certainly are now. And he always wanted to go back to it and to make something else of it, to not necessarily update it, but to extend it in some way. So he was going to adapt it into a film. He wanted, at one time, he was actively working on a sequel that was going to take place 100 years on from the final episode. And then the director, Simon West, he was developing it for a very long time. And Mel Gibson was attached to star as number 6, and McGowan was involved in that as well, because he just worked with Mel Gibson on Braveheart. They were going to, that project ultimately came to nothing, sadly. With the rise of pay-per-view TV stations, we did get a remake series on AMC that starred Jim Caviezel and Ian McKellen. That was a 6-episode thing. We'll probably look at that at some point in the future. Person of Interest, Babylon 5. There are several big American shows that owe a huge debt to The Prisoner. Lost as well. I think J.J. Abrams, he must have. If it's not one of his favourite shows, he certainly borrows from it quite a lot. Big Finish have made the most successful extension ever of The Prisoner. So they put together a series of audio dramas. So they were reworkings of the original stories and new stories too, with the actor Mark Elstob as number 6 of the various projects around The Prisoner. And there's not been a lot, granted. This is the only one that Prisoner fans have been charmed by, because it's the one that's the truest to the original show in the way that, in the feel. And Mark Elstob's number 6 is also fairly close, or close enough to McGowan, and there's some impeccable actors they cast as number 2. So I really do recommend that.
You can't remake The Prisoner. It's obvious you can't. It's just like
McGowan felt that you could.
Well, if he obviously he was the creator of it, so yeah, I'd give him a pass. But anybody else, it's a waste of time. It's like trying to create Columbo again. Do you know what I mean? It's a big waste of time.
It's a bit lightning in a bottle, isn't it? Because the first time you see something like that, that's why it's so successful. But once you kind of know it, people was going to go, "Oh, it's just very similar to The Prisoner," or if you do try and explain it all, then you kind of lose the point of this series, that you kind of make up your own mind what the village was and what.
I don't think it needs necessarily going back to explain, but I think it could do with going back to being explored for the reasons that Chateau identified in the and lots of people in the chat come to think of it, and that central theme of conformity that we've now come full circle to. It's the point where conformity is now a kind of mainstream thing. And the underground culture is actually the kind of stuff that we come out with on this channel. These themes and these questions are just as relevant today, and therefore to come back to this show, not necessarily literally, but to revisit the general setup, it could be viable. It would ruffle feathers, I think.
I can see that. I think in a way that there's a problem with the medium, though. I mean, The Prisoner. I think moving it toward film is exactly the wrong direction. If The Prisoner had been a book, I think it would probably still be much more widely talked about today, and probably more relevant today. It's very hard. What it's doing is very similar to what Orwell did.
Originally a novel, you mean?
I think originally a novel, it would probably have had a bigger impact, and a wider impact. Orwell's 1984 has never really had a satisfying visual adaptation. I mean, the closest one you can get is the John Hurt one. Brave New World has never had a good visual adaptation. There are certain story types which don't lend themselves very easily to visual mediums because they are so profoundly works of the imagination. As we heard when he was explaining in the interview, the whole premise of the thing and the concept he was trying to convey was that society is uncomfortable with the self. That's a very difficult thing to convey visually.
Yeah.
And in attempting to convey it visually, I think that The Prisoner does a spectacular job of creating its entire aesthetic. It is so very distinct. But that does also place it very firmly in a time period.
That's what I was about to say.
In a way that a book wouldn't. You can go back to 1984 and you will never read 1984 and look at it and think, well, that little bit is a little bit dated, or that white balloon is a bit weird and we don't really like that anymore. You wouldn't have had that problem. And it might have had a longer lasting and a wider reach for that reason. Not to say that it shouldn't be revisited, because, as you say, there is so much that it's talking about that is especially relevant now. But as, again, I think you were saying, the problem at the moment is that, for some reason, conformity has been sort of co-opted by the radical set. So, like, once upon a time, something like certainly in the 1960s, the countercultural movement would be proud of its non-conformity. Hippies were countercultural. That generation now is the one which says, you must conform. And actually, if you're conservative, then you're non-conforming. You don't go in for modern narratives. Yeah. And therefore, non-conformity is uncool, which is just a really bizarre turn of events, which I don't like. I don't think anybody does like. But that's what would make it very difficult, I think, to adapt today. But it's what might never have been an issue had it been a book to begin with and a TV adaptation. So
I wondered, based on what you've just said there, Platoon, Andy just pointed out this is on BritBox, you said, wasn't it, Andy?
BritBox.
Yeah, it's on BritBox. And I think on Amazon, it used to be on Amazon Prime. I don't know if it's on there. There's actually a documentary made.
I'll check.
5-6 years ago. I think it's like In My Mind, which is all
That's the one.
about
Yeah.
interviews of McGowan and the making of it, and there's behind the scene footage of making on it and interviewing people who are involved. And like I say,
There's a
going
handful of productions like that that are really worth tracking down.
It's really worth it. It's a really good watch. And it goes right up to him being in Hollywood, and I think there's an interview of him not long before he died, actually, one of like very rare ones he done, and the first time they've been shown on British TV, because quite often he'll do interviews and then ban them from being shown.
And it gets repeated a lot on stuff like ITV4. It turns up on there, on the Horror Channel, all these kind of Legend, all those channels. The Prisoner turns up. It's now more repeated.
See the rest.
It's more repeated now, more accessible than it's ever been. So what I was wondering is that just because these channels need content to fill up their channels?
Maybe.
Or is there real value? You know, I appreciate what you said about the book Platoon, and that's got me thinking. It really has. I'm not a big one. I'm not that literate myself, so I don't really read. But I know exactly what you're saying. But given the fact that it's still out there, is there still value in the 21st century in people, not just people rewatching it, but in people discovering it for the first time, finding it, successive generations?
Absolutely.
I think so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, it's a story, like we say, stories just aren't told that way anymore. And you can look at it from all the political, the action, the direction, the cinematography. There's so much that you could get out of watching this show if you just put your mobile phone down for 5 minutes. And I'd really encourage people to, go watch it and challenge yourself. What do you get out of it? And millennials might get something completely different to what we get out of it.
I have bought this so many times. I bought the videos. After I borrowed my friends' dads and watched those, I ended up buying the videos about 3 times. Every time they remastered it, I wanted the best possible version. I've bought it on DVD now 1, 2, 3 times. I've also got the Blu-ray. So I've got both of these. I've got both these box sets. It's out on DVD and Blu-ray right now. There was a new edition about 4 years ago. They're constantly putting new things in from Network and remastering it, so it looks better than ever. In some respects, it looks too good. You can see the little bits of gaffer tape holding some of the sets together. But other than that, you can even see the paint lines, Platoon, on the mini mokes and things like that, and on the and on some of the scenery. But other than that,
I think that would add charm to it, But I think you'd have to already be a fan of it. I mean, I think I'm on the tail end of Millennial. I'm trying to remember what the date range is, but
I never know, mate.
I think I'm on the tail end of Millennial. As to whether there's value, obviously there's immense value in anybody going and rewatching it, and especially today for all the reasons we've discussed. But I think going back to that point about book versus TV, the problem isn't is there value in getting people to rewatch it? It is, can you get people to rewatch it to begin with? Like, would it be? Is it so just out there? Is it so like old timey that people of like my generation and younger would look at it and think, well, why am I watching that when I could be watching something with a huge CGI budget? You still get occasional productions that come out. I think is it The Circle that came out relatively recently? By the standards of this,
I remember The Circle,
which is it's just a watered down version of your typical sort of young adolescent dystopia. Some of the same ideas are in it, but they're very deracinated and quite shallow. So that there's still sort of an appetite for the dystopia vision that it conveys. I just think you will struggle to get people of a certain generation to watch it because of how it looks and because it is actually quite a deep conveying of those things and not just a shallow surface level one, which is a shame. But if you can encourage more people of like my generation and younger to watch it, then by all means do, because they will hopefully take something from it.
The Prisoner is 56 years old this year and losing none of that potency, none of that appeal, relevance, and it sounds like entertainment value too. It remains, certainly for me, on the strength of this episode that I've just watched. I think I did a rewatch around 18 months ago, but it's still very pacey, it's unique, it's amusing, and it is confounding. I can't recommend it enough. I call this a seminal piece of genre entertainment. You can't call yourself a real geek until you've seen it, and at 17 episodes, that's readily available across all those places, formats and platforms, as you've kindly told us, Andy. It's a really easy box to get ticked. Patrick McGowan did have a long, successful career after The Prison. Of course, he did movies, TV shows in front of and behind the camera, and he sadly passed away in 2009. But he lived a very happy life. Happy marriage, and his daughter. I think she's an actress too. I can't quite remember, but she was there in Port Merion 5 years ago. Yes, it was for the 50th anniversary. Catherine McGowan was there in Port Merion to unveil a bust of Patrick McGowan there that remains in place in Port Merion. So you can go and visit that and see his scowl there for yourself. Give it a rub, give it a polish, and pay your respects there to the man who dreamt up The Prisoner, and whose work continues to entertain us all these years on. Thank you, everybody, for a great discussion. To everybody joining in the live chat there on YouTube, it's been a delight. Some great comments there. I'm going to star some of them and come back to them. And obviously to Andy, to Ian, and to Little Platoon there. So, Platoon, for the people out there who don't know you, who haven't seen you, to the podcasty crowd, where can they hear your stuff, see your stuff? What do you do and where do you do it?
Sure, yeah. So the main interest at the moment, I sort of film, TV, media reviews and things. That's over at the main channel, which is the Little Platoon. As Ian says, they tend to be insufferably long. So I do also have a shorter channel, which is Lost Chord, where I'm trying to do some more sort of like 10, 15-minute videos, which I'll get around to eventually. On Twitter at PlatoonPod, which is on the screen now. Very well done. So that's most of what I do. I pop up. My colleague has a channel as well, which is linked on my channel. He has a Substack, which again is sort of under the umbrella. And beyond that, I'm doing some video game writing and stuff at the moment as well. So I'm all over the place, but it's good fun.
You've got so many. It sounds like you've got too many pies for fingers there.
Oh wait, this last couple of weeks has been mad, but hopefully, yeah, it'll quieten down a little bit. So, this has been a really nice little chat and a break from that drudgery, because I have to go and do some writing stuff after it. But
are you talking about that other channel?
That quote
drudgery.
On the
channel.
Yesterday, Mr. Brown's was also a great break from drudgery. But no, it's great because I literally finished watching episode 1 just before I came on, and just from talking it through, just realizing that even having just watched it, there's so much stuff in it that I didn't pick up on, and it has made me more interested in going and actually paying attention to it. So I will be carrying on with it after the stream.
Marvelous. Well, maybe I can tempt you back, because I think there's a lot of value in revisiting this show, and I wasn't exaggerating. It's not hyperbole. Every single episode of this has more in it than the average feature film. Andy, I hope we haven't aggravated your throat too much.
I'm getting a little bit like coughing at the end. So,
how are you feeling now? And for people who want to hear and see more from you, where can they find you? Where can they interact with you and see your content?
I'm surviving. So you can always find my channel Atomic Blonde LDN with my new show Sunday Lunch on a Sunday, and I do bits and bobs in the week. And you can always find me on Twitter, as you can see there, Andy LDN50. And no doubt I'll be back next week for more listed.
Marvelous stuff. Yeah, we haven't scared her off just yet. Two great shows on the bounce there. She's coming back. Ian, how about you, my good man? You are all over the place. You've got Rebecca Gold, the prologue for season 2. That's up. People can see that 6 minutes worth, number 6 minutes worth of joy. And I know you're working on other things at the moment, but where can people interact with you, and where can people get involved with the GoFundMe or Kickstarter or both?
There's a GoFundMe on the Rebecca Gold channel. If you want to donate some money, that would be great. I'm on Twitter. My handle's below. And I'm on Facebook. And I'm on, obviously, YouTube with the Rebecca Gold channel. I am actually shooting season 2 every month, actually. I'm doing bits for it. So hopefully by the end of the year, it will be ready to be screened. But yeah, it's a slog. But, if you give me some money, it'd be less of a slog. Less of a slog. But yeah.
A compelling argument, as always,
my friend. Do you have a GoFundMe page or anything in?
I do. I have a GoFundMe page. If you go to the Rebecca Gold channel, you look at the prologue, there's the link to the GoFundMe. I
was going to say the link is in the description of every video on the Spacebook channel, and then I remembered I forgot to put it in this one. But I will add it later on. And
I'm not a number. I'm a free man.
Yes, so thanks as always for your company, Andy and Ian. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and groaning, ranting and raving about all things geeky inside and outside of the village. And you can catch up with all the other stuff that we've got on the channel too, podcasts and live streams and whatever else. Please like this video. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, check you're still subscribed, and hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. There's only one way. You're quite right, Andy. Actually, I think you do it better than he does, but I'm going to put this up anyway. There's only one way to end this one, I think. Thank you all for your company. But yeah, we will be seeing you. We'll be watching if you keep watching.